Welcome to VidZet. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. When I was in college, I worked at a company where there was a poster that said, "The objective of all dedicated employees should be to thoroughly analyze all situations, anticipate all problems prior to their occurrence, have answers for those problems, and move swiftly to solve those problems when called upon." However, when you are up to your ass in alligators, it is difficult to remind yourself that your initial objective was to drain the swamp. Welcome to Draining the Swamp. Our biggest problems in D.C. are spending and career politicians. And the problem there is no way to control either one of them with our current situation. Congressmen and senators try to buy their seats with more spending for their districts. And there is nothing to stop them from staying in power again and again and again. Because once they're elected, they've got name recognition, you're already there. And we now know that any congressman who has passed his second election has about a 98% chance of being reelected forever. A lot of that has to do with gerrymandering, but it also has to do with the fact that there aren't any term limits. For example, in Florida, a state representative has an 8-year limit. He can't serve any longer than that. Our governor can serve 2 terms. He can't serve any longer than that. But do we really expect our senators and congressmen to pass a term limits constitutional amendment? Not happening. Do we expect them to pass a balanced budget amendment? Not happening. So we have to look at a different mechanism, and it's called an Article 5 convention. Now, get out your pocket constitution. This particular one was free from the Cato Institute. Heritage Foundation will give you some too. I mean, you can see how big a book this is. There's nothing. And the pertinent part of Article 5 says, and I quote, "The Congress, on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which shall be valid when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, or by the conventions in 3/4 thereof." No ifs, ands, or buts. If 2/3 of the states, 34 states, say we want to call a convention to look at balanced budgets and term limits, I mean, they could list a whole bunch of other things, but balanced budgets and term limits, Congress has no choice. What happens then? Congress calls the convention, and they can say the convention will meet on a certain date, let's say in D.C. Each state will send a delegation, and each state picks their own delegation. All of the delegates get together, and the first thing they do is get organized. Now, the Congress has no power to determine how they get organized. So they choose their own presiding officer, they choose their own committees, they sit down and say, how long are we going to meet? And oh, by the way, do we want to meet somewhere else? Do we want to move to St. Louis for our meetings? Or Kansas City? Or Anchorage? Congress has no control over that. Once the convention sits, it can say we will meet periodically. It can say we will meet constantly. It can say anything it wants. It is its own rule. And this is something that scares the dickens out of people. Oh my goodness, will we have a runaway convention? Are we going to get a convention that proposes something like what happened in 2002 in Florida? There we had a constitutional amendment that actually passed. Now in Florida, 54% of the people passed it. It's now part of our state constitution that says you can't put a pregnant pig in a pen where it can't turn around. That's in Florida's constitution. It's dumb. I mean, I can see if you really wanted to, you could pass a law, but the Constitution? That's nuts. But suppose that this Constitution sits and decides that it wants a whole bunch of pregnant pig amendments. Okay, first of all, how do they do it? Ultimately, they sit down, they determine what a quorum is, and a quorum would typically be a majority. So let's go to an absolute worst case. 26 of the 50 states are present, that's a quorum. And then you take a majority of those, that means 14 states is required. Absolute worst case, never going to happen, but suppose it happened, that 14 states proposed and voted in favor of a pregnant pig amendment. Well, two things would happen. One, the Congress would look and say, this is what we call in legal terms ultra vires. That means it's outside of your mandate. Throw it away. It's not going to happen. You were there to look at balanced budgets and term limits. That's it. Nothing else. Any other pregnant pig amendment is gone. Second, let's suppose they even let it through. Now, Congress isn't going to be that stupid, but let's suppose they let it through. Now, remember, I'm inventing a worst case. I will guarantee that at the convention, all 50 states will be represented all of the time, and you will have to have 26 states vote in favor of any amendment for it to come through to the next step. So let's suppose we get our balanced budget amendment, our term limits amendment, and they go to Congress. And now it is sent to all of the state governors and legislatures and says, here is the text of the proposed amendment. You vote on it. Now, how many states have to vote in favor of a balanced budget amendment or a pregnant pig amendment in order for it to pass and become part of the Constitution? The Constitution says 38 states. The Equal Rights Amendment in the 1970s failed. It never got 38 states to ratify it. And if something like that couldn't get ratified in a period of time when equal rights had become a popular cause, then count on it. Only really good amendments are ever going to get ratified. You're not going to see an amendment to take away your right to keep and bear arms. You're not going to see an amendment to take away your right to free speech. It's not going to happen. So, what do we have? We have everything passes toward the states, and when 38 states say yes, then the Archivist of the United States certifies it, and instantly it's part of the Constitution. Once again, the Congress gets no say whatsoever. This is how the people take back the power. Remember, pregnant pig amendments will only become part of the Constitution when pigs can fly. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. Thanks for watching.